Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Mike again, Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. Hope everyone's staying safe and staying sane out there as we slowly come out of this thing, hopefully. Obviously, it's not going to be entirely back to normal. I think most of us know that, but hopefully you're hanging in there and playing some cool tabletop role-playing games, especially Savage Kingdoms. But, you know, whatever, will work. And hanging in there and enjoying yourselves as much as possible. All right, so today's video is about, well, to preface it first, so I did a video a few weeks ago about the differences between Savage Kingdoms and Dungeons & Dragons, particularly D&D 5th edition. So this video is the differences between the Reforged edition of Savage Kingdoms and the current edition, or the one that's coming out, which is Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition. So, differences between Reforged edition and SK3E. All right, so just a little bit of history. So in 2014, I first published Savage Kingdoms, self-published it in 2014. 3 years later, 2017, there was the sort of second edition. The reason I'm using air quotes is really a 1.5 edition, but we called it Reforged just to be cool, I guess. But what it really accomplished was in the first original edition in 2014, there was the core rule book that covered the Western continent mostly, and you know all your core rules, obviously, which is what called a core rule book. And then the second book that came out was called the Savage East, which covered the eastern part of the world. So the other parts of the world, the eastern and southern continents, and a couple of the isle continents of the known world of Savage Kingdoms. So in Reforged, the idea was to combine both of those books because we had some requests to do so. Not many, but some, enough to kind of go, hey, that's kind of a cool idea. And in the meantime, I decided I would spiff up some of the game mechanics, but there wasn't a lot of major changes, so that's really why I call it a 1.5 edition. And ultimately that's why we call it Reforged, because it sounds better than, it wasn't really quite a second edition, but saying 1.5 edition is kind of weird, so we called it Savage Kingdoms Reforged. So the book was very thick. I just had a copy next to me, and I packed it away in my bag, so anyway, you'll just have to trust me. So it was very thick. Some of you may already have it. 474 pages. Beautiful book. Got lots of good reviews about particularly about the art direction. It was really cool. So my only gripe with the book is that it was actually too thick. 474 pages, particularly for perfect binding, is actually a big hoss, a big product. There are a couple of gaming books out there that are a little bigger, but not many. Like Dungeon Crawl Classics, I think, is pretty big. The new Pathfinder book is probably about this. Actually, I don't think it's quite as thick as the Savage Kingdoms Reforged. Very close, anyway. The original Pathfinder one's pretty close as well. So yeah, it was a little too big in my opinion. Otherwise, great. Was completely happy with it. So now we're at Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition here in 2020. So basically every 3 years it looks like there's been a new edition, and that's actually pretty par for the course for a small indie game company. You have to 80% of your book sales are core rule books. This has all been proven through research. And if you're a smaller game, like obviously we're a pretty tiny little independent game, you have to be, the only way you remain relevant is to try to create new editions because otherwise people will just forget about you. The big companies can get along, you know, such as Wizards of the Coast and used to be TSR, etc., Paizo. They can wait 6 to 10 years before putting out a new edition because they're already famous, they're already popular, everybody knows about them. So to stay relevant in a small game, you have to kind of produce stuff every so often. You can continue your game line with different products of adventures and stuff, which I've kind of tried to do, but it peters out very quickly if you're small and you have to remain relevant by coming up with a new product. So there you have it. So Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition. So now I'm going to go through the differences between the Reforged edition and Savage Kingdoms 3E because I've had several questions. So this isn't a character conversion video per se. I mean, it'll help you with that hopefully, and maybe I'll do something like that later on. But I mean, it's the conversion of an old Savage Kingdoms character to SK3E actually is pretty easy, and I'll show you why in this indirectly. So I have 10 points to make for this. So the number one difference between the Reforged edition and Savage Kingdoms 3E, number one, is easier math. And this is one of my design goals. any good game designer sits down and writes out a few design goals he wants to hit upon, or memorizes them or something, and that's what you know, just like any company, that's your mission statement. That's your goal. That's what you're trying to accomplish. And one of them was easier math, and the way that's done. So basically, simply put, all the numbers in general are lowered by 5 from Reforged to SK3E, and that alone is like a somewhat major step towards easier math. Other things were done as well, which I'll get to eventually as I get through the list. But that's the main overall goal. So the numbers are easier to do head math with. Don't need a calculator. Not that you did before, but you certainly don't now. Yeah, it's just easier. I'll get into the details of that in a moment. So easier math is number 1. Number 2, there's now a calling system. So Savage Kingdoms remains a non-class-based system. Thankfully, that was by design. However, in fantasy in particular, a lot of players do prefer, if not classes, some sort of guideline. We used to call them life paths in the previous Savage Kingdoms editions, but they were more suggestive. They were more suggestions of what talents or weaknesses or skills or gear you might have if you were trying to build a particular type of character, such as a berserker or a craftsman or a knight or a sorcerer or whatever. So now with the new calling system, it's actually more. There's actually a more mechanical substance to it, more mechanical benefits. So if you choose a calling, for example, let's say noble. Noble's one of them. You would start with more money. You start with some pretty decent amount of gear in addition to some additional spending money. And then you start with several skills that are kind of aimed towards being a noble, persuasion, lore, stuff like that. This is just an example. Noble's just one of 20 callings that are in the core rulebook, and I think there'll be 3 more in the Savage East. So yeah, calling system gives you more. So you gain favored talents with them, and you may already know this, hopefully. And the race, your race and culture in Savage Kingdoms, when you choose that, you get what's called favored talents, meaning that you pay 1 point less for a talent if it falls in that list for your race and culture. Same with weaknesses, although it sounds weird to have favored weakness, but that's what we call it, because just to stay consistent with the terminology, you would gain an extra point for taking that. It's just something the culture's known for, maybe some kind of little weakness that they're known for. Maybe they're a drinking culture, or maybe they're afraid of the sea or fire a lot because they live in a forested area, something like that. So with the new calling system, a favored talent does the same thing. You pay 1 point less. So, and I know the question you already have is that, so if I have a favored talent for my race or culture, and also my talent, would I get in fact 2 points off? The answer would be yes, you would, actually. So that's the most a talent can be reduced is by 2 points. So yeah, so that's the way to do it. For all you min-maxers out there, which we all are probably to some degree. However, it's the system can be broken like any system, but it's kind of hard to break. So have fun with that. But anyway, hopefully it's actually allowing you to create more the character concept that you visualize for storytelling reasons. So a new calling system. Oh yeah, and a sub note to that, I guess 2B of that, because this is 2, would be that you don't have to choose a calling. So you can go old school Savage Kingdoms and not choose one at all and build whatever character you wish, a jack of all trades, just some kind of random person. Now, mechanically, you're not going to benefit quite as much. I guess the only thing is you start with more money, only because you don't get base gear. But you won't get the favorite talents and stuff like that. However, it does allow you the freedom to kind of build sort of whatever character. So that's still there. All right, number 3. The number 3 difference between Reforged Edition and Savage Kingdoms 3rd Edition. Number 3 is DLs or lower by 5. DL meaning difficulty level. D&D 5, D&D they call it DCs, difficulty class, and Savage Kingdoms we call them DLs. So we're not directly copying. The same idea though. It's a target number that you have to hit. Difficulty level, or DL, is lowered by 5. So again, that goes back to point number 1. The math is easier. The numbers are kind of lowered a little bit. So, for example, in the old Reforged edition, an average, I think it was 15 or 20. I think it's 20. for an average task would be DL20. Actually, I think it was 15. Anyway, point is, we'll say it's 20. Where in the new edition, an averaged to succeed in an average task would be a 10 or 15, because I can't quite remember. I think it's 15. An easy task to succeed in would be a 10. A very easy is a 5. In fact, in the book in 3rd edition, it says that most tasks that are difficulty level 5 that you think are just 5, which are very easy, that you just kind of hand wave them and just kind of assume. But you know, if it comes up in play where it's kind of a big deal, you need to know if that person exists, succeeds or not, then you can roll against DL5. But anyway, so they go all the way up to like 35 now for like legendary tasks, whereas in the past they went up to like 40, 45. Now technically they could go higher. These are all just sort of guidelines. More like guidelines than actual rules. No, this is actual rule. So DLs are lowered by 5, so it makes the math a lot easier, and that's just to keep in context with the lowered math. So they're lowered by 5. So therefore, tasks aren't any easier or more difficult than in previous editions. The numbers are just lowered to fit in with the new math. Okay, number 4. Number 4, attributes are now +0 base. And this is playing into what I just said about difficulty levels lowered by 5 and number 1, easier math. So in Reforged and the original edition, your 6 attributes, your main things about your character, your main raw abilities, were on a scale of 1 to 10. And I did that on purpose because a lot of times in normal life we sort of use that scale, like, hey, on a 1 to 10, what do you think that restaurant is? I think it's about a 7. I don't know why I did that accent. Or I think it's a 3 or 4. 5 being average. So that was the idea behind the original design. So, which, I kind of stick by. But the thing is, the numbers kind of get a little inflated. So if you say you have an 8 in an attribute or a 9 or something, and then suddenly now you have 5 or 6 skill levels in it, and maybe you have a +2 bonus, miscellaneous bonus from a couple of talents or a racial ability, and you're now looking at +17 or whatever, which is all well and good, but the numbers are just a little too big to juggle mentally. And also, if they get to a big point, those of you who are mathematicians would know this better than me, but the D20 becomes not quite as important at sight because you're already at +18. So what does it really matter what you roll, other than checking to see if you maybe had a critical success or something? So by lowering the math, not only does it make the head math easier, the table math easier, but now the D20 it means a little bit more. So yeah, as it should, right? So yeah, so +0 base. So in other words, an average attribute that used to be a 5 is now +0 or 0. But I like to put the plus sign in front to remind people that it's an addition. Or you might have a -2 in an attribute. You might have a +3. So the scale, I think, as character creation, you can start between a -3 and a +3, +4, depending on your race. So yeah, so attributes of character creation must all add up to a sum total of +3, which is actually better than Reforged and Additional because you had 32 attribute points, and if you scale it down to this edition, that actually equals 33. So now you're getting, what would it be, 33 from the previous edition. So in other words, a total of +3 in attributes at character creation, if that makes any sense. Moving on to number 5. 5, shields are now armor. So, which I know you're thinking, well, duh, shields are armor. Yes, and they can also be used offensively, but that's a whole different video. Meaning that, so they used to add to your parry defense, right? So you would just add them to your parry. You had a +1, +2, or +3 bonus to your parry. Actually, I think they were higher than that. Now they're that because they, again, lowered the math. I think they were +2, +4, up to +6. I believe you added to your parry depending on the size of the shield. So it added to your parry defense, and the reason we changed that, it now just adds to your overall protection rating, your overall armor rating. So you could be wearing, say, a chainmail shirt, a mail shirt, and have, say, a medium shield, a medium round shield, which is 2 points of armor, and your chainmail is 3 points of armor. You add that together, you have 5 points of armor. So it's very simple. So if you get smacked in combat for, say, 8 points of damage, You just look at your sheet. I had my shield on and my chainmail. That's 5, so I reduced the damage by 5. I took 3 points of damage. So it's pretty simple that way. Bucklers add 1 point of armor. A large shield, such as a Laurenthian, basically a Roman, scutum, big large shield, or a big Eridorian kite shield, or like adds 3 points of armor. So reason we did that way because it's just so much easier. Another reason too, just a real quick point, is that there are certain effects that deal fire, lightning, and ice. Certain energy effects only allow half your armor to work. And in the previous edition, it was a little difficult where it's like, okay, this is my parry defense with my shield. This is my parry defense without my shield. But then against Dragon Breath, it only counts as half. So now it's very simple. It's like it adds to your armor. If it's fire or lightning effect or ice or something, then you just use half your armor to reduce. So it's very simple, easy math. Okay, probably enough of that about that. So number 6, no damage modifiers to weapons except with AP. Probably won't understand what that means. So in previous editions, we had damage modifiers to weapons, right? So I created what I call a base 0 dagger. So dagger was +0 damage modifier when you hit, when you struck, when you succeeded in combat with it. A short sword I think was +2. A long sword I think was +4 damage modifier, +5 in two-handed, I believe. Great sword was +6. Great axe went up to +7, if I recall. I think a maul, a big massive hammer, was +6. Might have been +7. I think it was +6, etc. So when you scored a success in combat, you took the base, the amount of your success over your opponent's defense. That was your base damage, and then you added the modifier on top of that. Then you had to subtract armor. So that got a little too, once you got used to it, it was fairly fast, but it got a little annoying. So I decided to get rid of damage modifiers, except in the case, some weapons have what's called an armor piercing rating, or AP. However, most weapons, I wouldn't say most, I'd say probably half, light weapons and most one-handed lighter weapons particularly, have no armor piercing at all. So now, in other words, it's armor piercing is basically just bonus damage. So if you score 6 above your opponent's defense with a short sword, you did 6 points of damage, minus any armor he might have. If you score 6 above your opponent's defense with a two-handed long sword, that is 7 points of damage because it has an armor piercing of 1 when you use a long sword in 2 hands. One-handed is still 0. So as you can see, the number is smaller, and also they don't exist in certain weapons, so it makes the damage calculation very, very swift, very quick. And the numbers only go up to 3. So, for example, a great axe, a great sword, and a maul are all armor-piercing 3. The only thing that would increase that, a master-crafted weapon increases its armor-piercing by 1. So you could get up to a 4. If you were so lucky to have a heroic quality weapon, which is typically a permanently enchanted weapon, then that's another plus to the armor piercing. But again, even in that extreme case, the highest armor piercing you're probably going to get is 5. So again, armor piercing is just bonus damage. So that's how that works. Number 7, the core rulebook and the Savage East are now 2. I think I kind of touched upon that at the opening of the video, at the top of the video. Meaning that, so in Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition, we're going back to the original model, the 1st edition Savage Kingdoms model, meaning that we're going to have the core rulebook, which covers the West, in addition to, obviously, the core rules. And then the second book that comes out will be the Savage East, which it'll probably use the same title, because I like the title. The few people that know about the game like the title. So we'll have the core SK3 rulebook, and the Savage East will be released hopefully just a year after, if not, hopefully not even that long after. So you'll have both companion books right there. So you can run adventures, you can run campaigns in the West and the East that way. So, however, to that note, so if you could just run Savage Kingdoms just with the core rulebook, which is why it's called the core rulebook. Your games would have to mostly stay on the Western continent. I guess you could explore the East. You may not have the I'm not sure actually how the art layout's going to be yet, but you may not have access to the maps of the East, but you would know it's there, right? So yeah, if you're running stuff in the East, you probably do want the Savage East book, but you could theoretically just get away with the core rule book. So So marketing-wise, yeah, it's going to be 2 books. It's just easier. It makes the book smaller, like I was saying at the top of the video. I don't want it to be too thick. And then it's just, I think it's just good marketing overall as well. Okay, number 8. You can't spend more than 3 luck points per session. So, yeah, those of you familiar with the luck mechanic for Savage Kingdoms, you have a number of luck points, but they do not replenish after every session like some game systems do. However, if you look at your character sheet, look at the formula, you start with a fair amount usually, unless your intellect and magnetism are really low. But you have 5 as your base, so most characters start with usually at least 5 or at least 4, and some of them with 7 or 8 points. And that's for a reason, because they do expend. Every advancement that you attain, you do gain +1 to luck. So they're valuable resources, are nice, but they're not like super rare. Kind of rare, but not super rare, which is kind of what I wanted it. However, in the previous edition, in Reforged, you could just spend as many luck as you wanted to in one session. If you had 6 luck points, you could spend all 6 if you wanted, or 5, or whatever. So now it's capped at 3 per session. And I did that actually from running convention games, when you have to run just a 4-hour session at a Dragon Con or some convention that you're promoting your game about at. I set it at 3 because I'm like, somebody could just sit down a 4-hour session and just blow all the luck, because it doesn't really matter. It's like a one-shot. So I put the cap at 3 luck, and so I decided to just put it into the actual real game and just have it 3 luck per session. I think it's a little more realistic. It makes people a little more have to think a little bit more about when to use luck, etc. The only caveat, or the only addendum to that, I suppose, would be there's a gift or a talent called Fortune's Favor, which allows you to spend 4 luck points per session. So yeah, all right. So that's how luck works, and luck also works. I was toying with this mechanic of, it's fun to house rule your own rules. So I started using mechanic where you would make a luck roll. Say some character would say, "Did I? I meant to actually go get my horse out of the stable. Is that okay to say we did that?" And you can either go like, "That's fine," or if it might make a little bit of a difference, you could just say, "Make a luck roll. See if you happen to remember to do that." And usually the DL is 10. They get a 10 or better. So you just roll a d20, add whatever the current luck is to it. Say you're +6. So when you roll a 10, it's a 16 or whatever. I think in one campaign, I remember it coming up, was kind of cool. Someone pitched their tent. They had a tent, and they were camping during the night on a journey. And for some reason, they got attacked during the night. And for some reason, it became a big deal which side of the opening of the tent was. And so I just had the character make a luck roll. If we got a 10 or better, he got to choose where the opening was. I think he wanted it facing the water for some reason. So anyway, it was actually kind of a big deal in the scene. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, so the luck mechanic still works that way also. All right, number 9. Number 9, critical failures. Everyone likes to hear about that, right? Critical failures still exist, but they work differently mechanically. So in Reforged, you had, it was kind of a cool mechanic. I was kind of proud of it. Some people liked it in general. All right, so if you rolled a natural 1, it imploded, right? Because natural 20s explode in the system. So with a 1, say you're +6 in whatever skill you were rolling, and you roll a natural 1, so that's a 7, right? You end up with, you would have to pick up the die again and re-roll and subtract, so an imploding 1. If you got a 0 or less, you critically failed at that task. So in that example, natural 1, oh man, +6, 7, okay, cool, re-roll 12, great, now I'm -5. Meaning you critically failed. And a lot of the skills and some of the spells too, the more that you critically fail by, the more bad things happen, the more disadvantages occur. So getting to Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition, we removed the imploding 1 mechanic because of the fact that the math is tighter now, right? So since it's closer to a 0 base instead of a 5 base, if that makes any sense, and you implode a roll, so it's very swingy. In other words, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because you might only end up with like some of the highest might only be like a -2, -3, and yeah, something in my eye. And then, so if you end up with, and if you have to pick up the d20 and roll again, you could roll 17 or 18 on the imploding roll, and suddenly you got this massive, negative 15 to something. So in other words, it's a little too swingy. It's too swingy in that direction. So we got rid of it. It was also slowing things play down just a little bit, because natural 20s also explode, meaning that you roll it, you pick up the die, you roll it again, and add to what you got. If you get another 20, it keeps exploding. That's really rare, though, because it's only 5% chance you get a 20 every time you roll. So between the natural 20 and the natural 1, the exploding 20 and imploding 1, it slowed down play a little bit. Not a whole lot, but enough. So we kind of got rid of it. I might add it because the book is not, well, it actually is fully written. I'm editing it right now, but I might. So there's a chance I could add it as an optional rule, but probably not. And if I do, I'll definitely put a warning that just if you use the imploding 1 system, the math's going to be really swingy, so just be careful. So, all right, so the way critical failures work now in SK3 is that if you roll a natural 1, you add your modifier or subtract, whatever it is, and if you fail the task by 10 or less, you critically fail. For example, say the task you're trying to accomplish is difficulty level 20, and you roll a natural 1 and you're plus 7 in that skill. You end up with an 8. You critically failed because you were 12 short. You were 10 or more short of the DL from a natural 1. So it has to be a natural 1, and you have to fail by 10 or more. The other way you critically fail, because there's 2 ways, is if you get a 0, regardless if it's a natural 1. So for example, say you're -2 in something in a task, and you roll a 2. -2 is 0, so you critically fail if you get a 0 or less. Or you're -3 at something, and you roll a 1, or roll a 2 or a 3. 0 would be a critical failure. So there's 2 ways to do it. It seems like that would come up like, by the gods, Mike, that's lots of ways to critically fail. It's like, yeah, but it really doesn't. It's not extremely rare, but it's fairly rare. I only see a critical failure maybe once per session, possibly twice, sometimes none. And I like that. I really like that because, not to pick on D&D 5, because I like it as well, but and it's not even an official rule, but people, game masters and players, use that natural 1 as a critical fumble or failure all the time. And it's not even an actual rule. It's just a house rule people have done. But if you look at it mathematically, you're critically failing 5% of the time, and you're supposedly this hero. So, for example, say if you're a Major League Baseball player, and so you're obviously you've earned, you're way up there. You know your stuff as a baseball player, and you're playing the umpire is playing with the fumble rules of natural 1s. So that means that 5% of the time, when you're rounding second, you twist an ankle, or you break your bat every 5%, 1 out of 20 times you swing, or so your glove comes apart 1 out of 20 times when you're trying to catch the ball. So see my point? It's kind of silly. I know I'm making it even more silly, but hopefully the point remains. So critical failures, in my opinion, should be kind of rare. But they should still be there because they do add something to the game, in my opinion, just when they're rarer. The critical success system still exists. Exploding 20, 20s explode, so you roll again. So you can come up, you end up with a fairly high number. If you score 20 above what you need, 20 above the difficulty level, in other words, you critically succeed. There's an optional rule for double crit. So if you score 40 over, which is really rare, especially in the new math, but it's happened, then you can double crit. So you get to choose 2 critical effects, or the DM does, or GM does, sorry, Game Master. But that's optional. So, all right, last point, number 10. There's now a 2-action combat system. So in Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition, you now have 2 actions. Well, let me go back to Reforged. So in Reforged, the Reforged edition and the original, or no, I think it was just Reforged. Anyway, it doesn't matter. In the previous editions, you in combat or any action scene similar to, but 90% of the time it's combat, you gain a primary action and 2 secondary actions. So primary action, as the term probably lends itself, is like your main thing, like a spell or an attack or something major. A secondary action was something minor, drawing a weapon. Certain talents worked off of it, like war cry or something like that. Basic movement, a double move would be a primary. stuff like that, which worked pretty well. But as you could probably tell by that description right there, it can get a little wonky and confusing. Not too bad, but kind of. So this time, I decided to play test a 2-action combat system, and it's worked really well. Super awesome. Makes it really fast. Very simple. You just have 2 actions in every combat round. If you critically succeed initiative, meaning you score 20 above your opponent's initiative, you actually gain 3 actions in the opening round of combat, but only the opening round. Then it's just 2 from then on. So the caveat to the 2-action system is you can only take 1 attack action per round. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One is that it's from a game mechanic or game design standpoint. If you were to win initiative of your opponent, you could technically, if you were close enough or with a ranged attack, you could get 2 attacks on this person, this target, before they could counter. Having done some medieval reenactment and even some martial arts, that's really rare. That's like, unless you just like stun your opponent, like what the heck just happened? There's almost always a counter attack that's coming in for anybody worth their salt in battle. The other reason that is because, narratively speaking, cinematically speaking, a lot of players are going to choose, especially in like melee, say if you're engaged, they're just going to use both actions to attack. And so that means that you get this static battle that people are just, I swing twice and this guy swings. So that can be a little boring. So by setting it up like it is, if you're engaged in combat, there's the 1 attack action, you have another action. Well, some people will just be like, well, I'm not going to do anything. But it does give you the chance to withdraw if you want. Do something else. Try to flip over the person, try to grab a tree branch above or something. So the point is, it does allow another action to do something else. So you can only 1 attack action. Now, some attack actions allow you multiple attacks. So don't think you can only do the 1. Ambidexterity allows you to wield 2 light weapons at once and get 2 dagger strikes, or a club and dagger strike or something. Dual blades gives you the opportunity to wield 2 medium-sized weapons, such as 2 long swords or about 2 battle axes, or a battle axe and long sword, to make 2 strikes as 1 attack action. Shield bash allows you the same thing. Pugilistic follow-up allows you like a kick or a punch or a headbutt or something after you swing. And then certain races, such as the Sleer and the Chernari, have a claw attack or a bite attack. And if they have ambidexterity, in fact, there's one of my kid gamers who plays a red Sleer, and he's got actually he's a brawler. He's got like a cestus, so he punches twice and he bites, so he gets 3 attacks in 1 combat action, which is really nice. So also you can only cast 1 spell in a combat round. So if it's a 1 action spell, which a lot of them are, unless you're doing a ritual, which takes an hour, then you can only cast the 1 spell per. And even if that fails, I've actually forgot my own rule on that. So where if the spell fails, you can't try another one. It's just too draining to be doing it. In the world of Savage Kingdoms, the default way that magic is generally practiced is actually through ritual magic. It's usually only adventurers and people that are involved in battle where they've learned to do these very quick versions of them, which is why it costs so much stamina, even if you fail. So yeah, so that's the 2-action combat system. Makes things very fast. Moving up to your mobility and yards, your mobility rating is just 1 action. If you move double that, it's 2 actions. Very simple, which is a run times 2. If you can sprint, which means you can move up to times 3 your mobility and yards, which is also 2 actions, but it costs us a stamina point because you're sprinting all out. Yeah, so I think that really summarizes the whole thing up, guys. That was 10 points of the differences between the Reforged edition of Savage Kingdoms and SK3E. So thanks for listening. Hopefully that answered some questions. If you have old Reforged characters, that might help you convert them. It's pretty easy, actually. Or just wait for the 3rd edition book to come out and just go from there. I think it's laid out better than the previous books a little bit as well, so a little more comprehensive. So hopefully this video helps you guys out. Thanks for paying attention. Hopefully you got to the end of it and learned some things, and I will talk to you guys again soon. All right.